Welcome to the Expert Network Team podcast,
where our goal is to inform and educate listeners on matters of finance, legal, insurance, and other interests that are of personal and business nature.
We hope you enjoy the information contained in today's podcast and find it useful.
We'd like to introduce your Expert Network team of professionals.
I'm Karl Frank, owner and financial planner at A&I Wealth Management. I work with clients to help them grow and protect their investments and choose how they want to be taxed.
I'm Jeff Cromendike, a managing principal of One Digital Insurance. I work with individuals and businesses to help them understand their risk exposure and lead them to risk transfer solutions that best fit their needs.
I'm Nathan Merrill, founder and attorney at Goodspeed Merrill, providing advanced tax strategy and private client legal services to affluent families and entrepreneurs.
Together, our independent team combines our expertise to provide you insights and solutions, some straightforward, some profound, addressing real-life opportunities we see on a daily basis.
If you'd like to learn more or desire to meet with any of the Expert Network team professionals in person, you can contact us at info@expertnetworkteam.com. That's info@expertnetworkteam.com.
We encourage you to take advantage of a free consultation with any of our professionals. Just mention this podcast when you schedule your appointment.
Without further delay, please enjoy today's podcast.
Welcome to today's podcast. I'm Nathan Merrill, Goodspeed Merrill, and I'm here with Karl Frank of A&I Wealth Management. Karl, welcome.
Hi, Nate. It's great to see you again. Thanks so much for making the trip from your office all the way down to my office.
Yeah, those will get me about 50 steps closer to my 10,000 step goal.
It's a stairwell. That counts double.
Yeah. Well, it's going downhill, though. I'm using gravity to my favor here. So I think today we're going to pick up, since, a fair number of these podcasts are you and me, musing back and forth for each other, almost like reciprocal therapy.
That's a funny way to put it.
But where we left off last time.
Neither of us are qualified as therapists, so maybe the listener is the missing therapist in the room.
Sure. Well, to my last point, communication is a very strong therapeutic. Just communication solves a lot of problems. But on that note, where we left off last time was tossing out the idea of if you're to project forward in your planning and say at the point where money or bickering about money or bickering about the wealth that's locked up in our family plan is causing the problems. It could be a family business. It could be a family office, a family limited partnership that's investing our family assets. There are all sorts of reasons why that might not already be divided amongst several trusts. Oftentimes the knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, at that point in time, just give them the option of breaking it up so that my bickering family can all have their own shares and go their separate ways.
And that seems like a really interesting idea. I don't want
Seems logical.
Right? That's a great place to start. So I know this. I know we've had experience in the past with not a family, but a business. And at the end of that business, if the two partners are not going to agree with each other, they put various clauses into a business to blow it up. Right.
Or like a Texas shootout provision where there's.
Just about to mention Texas shootout. You could describe it at greater lengths than I could. But the result is that they agree to go their separate ways.
Right. And it doesn't necessarily mean they like it, but at least we've broken up what can cause damage to the company. That's the idea, at least.
It's kind of similar for a family, right? So.
Well, except for it's not a family. That is, I think, is at the crux of the issue of what we're talking about here. If we view our family and our desire to have our family be an affinity unit,
yes.
Why does breaking it up make the most sense?
It doesn't make any sense at all. That would be the worst possible case.
But that's kind of, again, our default because we're saying, well, to avoid the bickering or to prevent the bickering or to prevent the infighting, what we're going to do is just break this up so every child can have their own thing. And then the assumption is they'll go back to harmonious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think largely speaking, that probably never happens. Because again, back to what I was saying in the last episode, the money usually was not the actual problem.
Yes, it's just exaggerating the problem. It's bringing out the faults that were already there, whether they were small or big, whether they were Johnny, the older brother, always got new shoes, and Jenny, the little sister, always got Johnny's used shoes, which would
Right.
be a funny example to go from male to female. She must have big feet.
Big feet, which may be
Which might be a different issue because maybe she's taller than he was, and he's always been jealous that his little sister is actually taller. Now we've got really big family issues. There's no way that family can survive $1 million or more inheritance. Oh my
right.
gosh.
So the flip side of that, let's just go to the other extreme. Rather than saying divide it up and send it out to all the heirs, what if we said, and have you ever done this as a parent? Well, if the two of you can't play with this together, I'm just going to take it away from both of you.
Exactly.
That's the other extreme. And maybe, and I say it as an extreme, but I'll tell you, this is personally kind of the direction I'm leaning. That in my, and full qualified disclosure to people listening is, when I say I'm going to do something in my planning, this is not how I necessarily suggest other people do their planning. This is just food for thought for this
sure.
discussion
Yeah,
for the most part,
that's good.
because I'm sure some people might listen to this and say, well,
won't
that's a pretty extreme response too. But
This is true.
but again, we all bring our own life experiences, our own perspectives
Right.
to our planning, and this is why what my efforts in planning are is to really
Yeah.
bring out people's true
help them think
goals,
through.
help them identify what their goals and objectives are, and develop a plan that helps achieve that.
Well,
So
and I hope our hope for this podcast is to help people get clarity
yeah,
and to get some direction and maybe get a little fire under your fannies to take the next step and make things better.
right. And what I'm going to expose in this, talking about the other extreme of planning, is you begin to realize that the plan itself is never going to solve this problem. Ultimately, it's up to the family members to
Yeah.
figure that out. And so
You can't just stroke a check and hope it all goes away
right.
any better than you can draft a legal document and hope that all the problems are solved.
Right. So the direction I'm going, and this is just food for thought for you to respond to me, is basically at the point that there's some contention, and how that's defined in the documents I wouldn't get into. But if there's a trigger event that is a contentious event, basically all the benefits provided under the arrangement, the agreement, the family legacy would pull back. So there would be no trigger for them to divide it up and go their own way with it. It would just simply stop to exist for them unless and until they can figure out how to get along again.
Yeah.
And it would just reside there in suspension. Again, providing that even those who are not doing anything wrong, it would compel, to the extent they need any benefits from that
Right.
arrangement,
Yeah.
to figure out a way to
Get along.
resolve their differences.
Yeah.
Because and the reason why I say this is the thing that is most important to me is not how wealthy my children are, it's how strong their bonds of unity are.
Oh, wow. That's really profound.
And so in my mind, I have not strengthened their bonds of unity by creating the opportunity for them to become separate and distinct
Right.
entities.
Yeah.
In my mind, it's not the end of the world if they don't get a huge inheritance or even a modest inheritance.
Right.
They can create their own wealth. They're entirely capable of that.
Yeah.
And again, this all comes back to if the inheritance or the vehicles or the assets that I've left behind to benefit them become the medium by which they are attacking each other, it's going to stop.
That's great. What would that look like in particular? I mean, and maybe you hinted at it, but it's not saying whatever this trust or vehicle is that I've created suddenly turns into a charitable trust and we donate all the money to the church or to something else.
It might do some of that. I mean, because again, the principles or the values I'm trying to teach them through whatever plan I set up with is it's not the money.
Right.
I don't care about the money. I care about you as a family. So if I have to take some of that wealth and say that because you haven't figured this out, I'm going to benefit
We're
my
gonna go
church
somewhere else.
or my
Whatever the charity is that
probably-
means the most to you.
or the charity that fosters those values.
Right.
Because it's not working here, I might as well send it somewhere else.
Africa. Africa's
Right.
amazing. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. So that actually gets me kind of, a million miles an hour, a lot of wheels going in a lot of different directions to pull it back into something more measurable. How do you foresee what would be a bad enough bickering to blow things up? I mean, and maybe a specific example, or maybe that's inappropriate to ask.
I think, well, first to qualify, I think it's going to be different for everybody. So whatever, regardless of what I say, that might resonate with 5 people and leave 500 people kind of thinking, I don't get it. Why is that so important to him? But I think at some level, it could be measured. It's obviously measured by overt contentious, call it legal action or.
Well, there's a good draw. Yeah, that's a really nice, easy line in the sand.
Yeah. So
as soon as you threaten legal action, this whole thing changes.
Right. The other one is, again, focusing on what I'm trying to get the assets to accomplish, and that is to create family unity. So if I have children, a child, and this again makes them joint and severally responsible for the health of the family. If one of them starts to isolate themselves, stops participating in family governance, simply checks out, feels ostracized for whatever reason, and the other family members aren't making an effort to rectify that, to bring that family lineage, because it's not just the child, it's their whole lineage that is affected, right? So they would need to demonstrate some express efforts to rectify that.
Yeah, to try and bring them in. What about mental health? I mean, I can imagine that kid. I mean, we can imagine that mental health is a huge deal in America. A lot of the homeless situation, that's a big problem all across our country and in our communities, is due to mental health. If you had an offspring, down in the road, somebody who has mental health issues, they might not be able to help themselves. You could probably write something or think about that.
Right, but it doesn't mean that the whole, again, I'm looking at this less at an individual level and more as a lineage level. So it's possible for one child, as an example, to isolate themselves, but then the outreach should be to their children, to bring them back into the family. Right. Because the whole point of the asset is to strengthen the family, not to create a lifestyle, it's to strengthen the family. And a lot of that is done by giving them opportunity to grow their assets. A lot of strength in the family has a byproduct of contributing to or producing enhanced family wealth.
Yeah, that'd be amazing, wouldn't it?
So
what an opportunity that would be.
But that's not the focus. Again, the focus is to ensure that every family member has an invitation and an opportunity to participate in the family governance. And family governance is not like corporate governance where they have a seat on the board, but they feel that they belong, they participate, they contribute. And this gets back to some of the things that we discussed in a Lost podcast is some of the things we did, for example, at our recent family reunion, where we're extending the opportunity for even the youngest capable family members to contribute and be a part of the process.
Yes, the Vault of Lost podcast. I wish I could find it out there in the cloud.
But the point there is, again, and this is just simply what someone has to ask themselves: what do they want their wealth to accomplish? Do they simply want it to build balance sheet from generation to generation? Well, in that case, you focus on, and if they do, then you got to make sure that your plan is designed to focus on transferring balance sheet wealth from one generation and preserving it. That's where all the asset protection and spendthrift and all that sort of stuff is designed to preserving wealth.
Legally to do that, but it could blow up the family to get there.
But that's maybe not what.
I think the vast majority of people want both. And if they had to choose between the two, would probably prefer the relationships endure and the money can be recreated. I think a lot of, at least first generation families recognize that, and maybe second generation where they've seen their parents build the wealth might also see that. Perhaps it's 3 or 4 or 5 generations, like the guest we had in a previous podcast had done it for 5 generations. It's quite powerful and can be somewhat overwhelming to think, oh my gosh, I'm the one responsible for this.
Well, and that's the exact opening comment he made in Roey's conversation with us, which he's like, I came in as a 4th generation, and you want to talk about having shoes to fill. They called his dad the legend.
Yeah, that's stressful.
So but the point, and I don't know that Roey used these exact words, but this is, I think, what we're trying to accomplish when we talk about creating a 5-generation family, is each generation operates as a first generation. So when you say, first generation people really truly have this mindset, well, then let's just have everybody be a first generation.
I love that idea. How do you make everybody a first generation?
You help them own the legacy. It's not theirs to steward. It's not theirs to remember or replicate. They have to make their contribution to the legacy their own, because then they'll have their emotional and value connection to their legacy, and they'll recognize that their contribution was different than their parents, and they will now expect the same thing from their next generation. Every generation recognizes they have their own ownership of the legacy. They have their own things to contribute.
Nate, you and I manage young people. And we manage people of all generations, but to me, what you just said, I think would resonate with that generation that we're managing, the youngest generation in my firm, the right out of college generation. They want to own, they want to make an impact. This generation famously all across the news media says, we want to make an impact. We want work-life balance. We don't want to just we've seen our parents work too hard. We've seen these other uncles and aunts and whatever. We want to make an impact. I think that would resonate to say, this is your opportunity to make an impact on the family. So that imagine stereotype, oil and gas, and new generation being, oil and gas money. That's how the wealth perhaps was created, something that way. And of course, in today's world, oil and gas is disliked by, say, the new energy people and the green, what you might.
Well, the Getty heirs, as an example,
yes.
are the most.
So you think about that, and then you think about a next generation, and maybe they're a musician or an artist or somebody who is, very different and couldn't possibly go and run the business.
Family business.
There's no possible way, but they could still make a huge impact in this family in this regard, because they're going to bring their skills and talents to this. So maybe in some sort of way, I don't know what that would be for them.
Yeah, they have to be, and that gets to setting forth, as you call it, the values of the family. Because if the values of the family are only manifest by adding to the balance sheet, well, then the values of the family are money.
Right.
But if you can define the values of your family, what it means to be a Frank, what it means to be a Merrill, in non-monetary terms, in terms of achieving and contributing, achieving your own potential and using that potential to contribute positively to the family legacy, whether it adds another dollar to the balance sheet or not, but that they can own that and contribute that.
Yes.
It's hard to believe that when someone's pursuing their passions and their God-given gifts, that they don't produce positive economic results. But that's not to say everyone does. I mean, most artists, their stuff isn't worth anything until they're dead anyway. So you can be a starving artist and then leave a huge legacy.
Impact. Yeah.
But that's why I say it comes back to how you truly define what you value as a family. You'll get what that truly reflects. Because
everyone has a chance.
If you're subtly making economic performance the benchmark of any value to the family legacy, you're going to
alienate.
And not
everybody's going to have those skills.
Right.
Just like we were talking about earlier, it's amazing how diverse, the same gene pool from mom and dad can create amazingly diverse children, right? And you want to honor them all, and you might love them all equally or fairly, but you want to build something with the family legacy that also honors them all as unique individuals, and not only honors the ones who can build the dollars.
Right. So that's a perfect example of where, if the family value is unity and collaboration, you can take people who have different skill sets, and working together, they can achieve more than what they would accomplish on their own. So rather than setting everybody off on their own, princely conquest,
whatever it might be,
have them go off as a united force,
right,
to conquer the world together. And they lift each other up and they support each other. If you can design your family value structure to encourage collaboration and that integrated, let me help you, and then maybe someday you'll be able to help me, and together we can accomplish more than we ever can separately, then you've created a value structure that doesn't focus on creation of balance sheet wealth, but will likely succeed in doing so.
It'll be a natural result,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll get your cake and eat it too. Pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Pretty powerful.
I mean, there's so much to explore and examine there at a very deep personal level that it's, I'm not suggesting this is the kind of conversation I have with every client, but it's one that I hope every client would reflect on and think about, because estate planning, as with financial planning, has become highly commoditized to the point where it's like, I don't know what to think about what I want to do with my plan. Like, help, tell me what I should think. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you what you should think about doing with your plan, but I'll help explore what matters most to you. And again, develop a plan that supports that.
That's in alignment with your goals and values.
But you got to understand what you care about to have an effective estate plan.
Deep conversation. Every bit as entertaining as I hoped it would be. I hope people in the audience find it half as entertaining as I did.
Oh, I hope so too. Because I mean, this is stuff that I just never stop thinking about.
Well, and I think a lot of us do think about it, but we, hopefully this gets people a little bit more further down the road of achieving a success.
I hope so.
For their own unique situation.
Yep.
Nate, always great to see you. Thank you so much for all your advice and conversation today.
Likewise.
Create a beautiful day.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the discussion and the information we shared.
We hope you enjoy the information contained in today's podcast and find it useful.
We hope you will join us again next time as we explore new areas of interest to our listeners or current issues we believe are important to discuss.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe so you are notified when future episodes are released, and also share it with a friend that you think would benefit.
If you'd like to meet with a member of the Expert Network team or have a request for a special topic you'd like to have us discuss on the podcast, submit those requests to info@expertnetworkteam.com. That's info@expertnetworkteam.com.
Thank you for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. We want to remind you that listening to this podcast does not establish a client-professional relationship with any of the professional firms represented, including guests, nor does it constitute legal, investment, accounting, or other advice of a fiduciary nature. The views expressed are those of the professionals only.
Investment advisor services may be provided through A&I Wealth Management. Securities may be provided through Genios Wealth Management.